So, Homer, not everybody understands what GitHub is. So can you do kind of, because I do think it's a really interesting educational resource. And I think almost nobody who's not already a geek would understand why GitHub is relevant here. So can you give just a quick GitHub 101 and how it's relevant in this context?
Sure. So GitHub is a managed website application app that hosts code. And it's called GitHub because it's based on Git, G-I-T, which is a version control tool. So it just controls different versions of code. And so programmers use it to track different code bases and the code for different things. And the version control means that there's a sane way of combining people's changes so that if Matt has an application and he makes it open source, that means that anybody can see it on GitHub. Anybody can look at all the code. And then if Kath wants to contribute, she wants to add a new feature, then she can open a request and say, hey, Matt, I added a new feature to your application. Please accept my code change. And then he can look at it and say, it looks good. And then this open source application has a new feature. So wow. This is a sort of great ecosystem because anybody can look at open source projects. So like if you're wondering how does something work, if it's open source, you can just go and look at the code. And it's okay to not understand all of it. Nobody expects anybody else to understand all of it immediately, but it is all there. And often there are helpful explanations for what it's supposed to do. There's a huge amount of open source software. So GitHub is not the only provider, but it's probably the biggest. And you can find tons of awesome projects. So you can look at existing code. You can make your own application with its own code. And you can share the source code for your application. And you can also contribute back. So I think that especially for like hiring and if you're looking for a job, it's a great way of kind of demonstrating your familiarity and competence by finding ways of contributing to open source software. And as a beneficial side effect, you also get to make software better for everybody, which is also great. So I think like it wasn't really around when I was in high school, but it's a great resource and it's a really kind of nice way of bridging the gap between learning kind of programming as like a beginner and kind of incrementally gaining the confidence experience to the point where you can have like a portfolio that you could use to be hired somewhere. And I would also add like it's not just something that you would necessarily do for like a software development career, like we mentioned, like data science, like data scientists are also expected to write code. And so it's a great way, if you're interested in becoming a data scientist, it's a great way of saying and demonstrating like that you're familiar and competent and able to write code and you know the popular tools out there. So yeah, definitely recommend taking a look at GitHub and finding some open source projects that you're interested in.